We also have to educate our people. Our founder said that our strength, our system, our freedom is based upon a well-informed and educated populace. And if we ever become anything other than that, the nature of the country will rapidly change because people would be easy to manipulate. And we have to educate people, for instance, about our financial status, about the whole concept of the fiscal gap, all the unfunded liabilities and monies that we owe for the various agencies and departmental programs versus what we expect to bring in revenues, taxes and other revenue sources. That should be even. And if it's not even, there's a gap that forms there. You bring it forward to today's dollars, it's called a fiscal gap. It sits at over $200 trillion. That is an unimaginable amount of money. And the only reason we can sustain that is because we can print money, which we're doing irresponsibly because we're the reserve currency of the world. We've got to educate people about our financial infrastructure and how precarious it is, so that when somebody comes along and says free college for everybody, they know what that means. That means that's going to send us off that cliff much faster than we would normally go. And we have to begin to think logically about what we're going to do. And just to give you an example of how much trouble we're in right now, and I'm going to close with this and sit down. If I were in charge of this nation and I was trying to destroy it, what I would do is I would try to drive wedges between all the people. I would have a war on women, race wars, income wars, age wars, religious wars, any kind of war I could have going. The Democrats would hate Republicans, Republicans would hate Democrats. I would try to destroy the financial foundation by driving the debt to unsustainable levels. I would invite people in here from other countries and give them all kinds of benefits. I would be trying to get our people on every kind of welfare there is, food stamps. I would say, after all, in the Constitution, it does say in the preamble to promote the general welfare. And everybody should be on welfare. And I would be giving people free phones, and I would be telling people free college tuition. I would go all the way. And then I would destroy our military, and I would destroy the esprit de corps that exists there. And I would have the smallest Navy since 1917, the smallest Air Force since 1940. And I would treat our veterans horribly, although I would be saying all the time how wonderful they are. And in the meantime, 22 a day of them will be committing suicide, and generals would be retiring early because they couldn't go along with what was going on. And I would pay attention to the electrical grid, knowing that it puts us at great jeopardy. And that's the things that I would do. Now, any semblance to what's going on, I'm sure is coincidental. But it gives you some idea of the trouble that we are in. And if it's going to change, it's going to change for one reason and one reason alone. And that is because we, the people, are the ones who are at the pinnacle, who make a decision. But it means we must be active, and we get to determine. And the president has said we are not a Judeo-Christian nation, but he doesn't get to decide. We get to decide who we are.
Dr. Carson, Susan from Greenville wants to know, if you were elected president, what would be your first 2 or 3 priorities, and specifically, how would you implement those priorities?
Well, I think the first thing I would do, one of the prerogatives of the president, is to call a joint session of Congress and make sure that everybody understood that we work for the people, they don't work for us. I think that is absolutely essential that we make that clear. I think we need a balanced budget. And I would make it clear that I would not be going along with any budgetary increases whatsoever. And I would work with the members of Congress so that we begin to look at areas that we can fix before we get to the point where our backs are up against the wall and somebody's got a gun to our head saying, either you raise the ceiling or we're going to default. We seem to do that every single time. And I would just let them know that if necessary, I'll take the blame, but there is no way signing anything that increases the budget. We have to act like fiscally responsible individuals. And then the other thing is we have to get our military right once again. If we don't get the military right, particularly living in a very dangerous world that we live in right now. And that's going to mean some reshuffling of resources. It might mean that we don't get to find out about the sex life of a shrimp or something like that. But somehow I think we can get by without that information.
Very good. Lisa Roach from Spartanburg has a question for you. Certainly we are in the Bible Belt. We in South Carolina think of ourselves as the buckle on the Bible Belt.
Amen.
And that was my best joke, and it didn't work, so I won't use that again. Yeah, not again. Anyways, her question is a simple question. Psalms 122:6 says, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and those who do will prosper." Will you stand with Israel?
Absolutely. There is no way. I was in Israel last December, and I didn't find one single person who didn't think we had turned our backs on them. And it is such a strategic partner to have, not to mention the fact that, you know, we have a rich Judeo-Christian relationship here. If you have a wallet and you pull it out and you pull a $1 bill out, you look on the back of it, do you know that there was a Star of David on the back of the $1 bill? It's because Hiram Salomon, a wealthy Jewish businessman, it's felt that it's really in tribute to him. Because when George Washington's army ran out of money, he gave everything he could to save George Washington's army. And he also served in other capacities to help our nation. And that's just one example of the relationship between the Jewish community and America. And they're an important part of who we are, and also have worked with us on strategic initiatives. So, not to mention the fact that they're our friend. You don't turn your back on your friends. And people notice that around the world, that we turn our back on them, we turn our back on Ukraine. Nobody can count on us. Our army is deteriorating. We're putting ourselves in this horrible situation. All of those things, I think, we can turn around pretty quickly. And I think we need to retake our position of leadership in the world.
Dr. Carson, Senator Scott has dedicated most of his professional career to educational opportunity, and education being the closest thing to magic that we have in our culture. What are your thoughts on the role, if any, of the federal government in education, and what are your thoughts, and this is coming from Linda in Greenville, on school choice?
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just say, I am so delighted to be here today with two of my favorite people in Congress. You know, you guys are the best. If everybody would like you, you'd be I do believe that education is the great divide. It doesn't matter what your ethnic background, your financial background. If you get a good education, you write your own ticket. And we need to once again begin to emphasize that the best education we find is the education that is closest to home. Homeschooling, private schooling, charter schools, and then lastly, public schools. So many of our young people are stuck in non-functional public schools that are controlled by teacher unions and people who are not that interested in educating the children. And we're finding very high dropout rates in those kinds of schools. Why? Because those kids are saying, I'm not getting educated anyway. I may as well drop out. I think one of the ways that we can rectify this is to make sure that we have school choice for every child in this nation. And the reason that that will make a huge difference for us as a nation is because we only have 330 million people. And we're competing against China, we're competing against India, places that have over 1 billion. And we need to develop all of our people. We can't afford to have 20% of our kids who enter high school dropping out before they finish. You know, there are so many ramifications to not having good education. And I believe that it's something that we have the ability to change, but we have to make it a priority because it will determine the success of our country in the future.
Zachary Klein from Greenville wants to know your specific plan for reforming our tax code.
Okay. Well, our tax code definitely needs to be reformed. You know, during the original Boston Tea Party, you know, the tax percentage was less than 5%. They would probably have a stroke if they were here today. So, but and it also is a deterrent to entrepreneurial risk-taking and capital investment. I like a system that is proportional. You know, that's why I mentioned tithing, not because it has to necessarily be at 10%, but because it's proportional. You make $10 billion a year, you pay $1 billion. You make $10 a year, you pay $1. You get the same rights and privileges. You know, that seems awfully fair. And if God thought it was fair, I don't think we can improve on that. But you also have to make it truly fair, you have to get rid of all the deductions and all the loopholes, because people will automatically migrate toward any kind of deduction in order to advantage themselves. So just get rid of all of them. I do take into consideration poverty, and at poverty level, people will get a rebate. It won't be 100% rebate, but it'll be pretty close to that. Because we do always have to consider the poor in our society. We've worked the numbers out so that we can do that rebate at 14.9% for everybody. The other thing is that we get rid of a whole host of other taxes. You don't have the death tax, any of those kind of things anymore. You will still have to deal with taxing foreign income that is brought back in. But that, of course, is still done at a 15% rate. And right now, none of that money is coming back in between 35 and 40%. In addition to that, to get a major stimulus going on in our country, I would look at that $2.1 trillion that's overseas and recommend a 6-month hiatus in the corporate taxes to allow that money to be brought back to America, tax-free, with the stipulation being that 10% of it had to be used in enterprise zones and creating jobs for people who are unemployed and on welfare. You want to talk about a stimulus package? That would be the biggest stimulus since FDR's New Deal that wouldn't cost the taxpayers 1 penny. You know, those are the kinds of low-hanging fruit. And that would also encourage business and industry to start thinking about something that they used to do, which was invest in their communities, invest in the people around them, because that is one of the real keys here. The government came over and it took over that job and it says, we'll take care of the people. And the businesses begin to divest themselves of that responsibility. But the fact of the matter is, taking care of the people around us is the job of we the people. It is not the job of the government. And when we understand that, we will have a much clearer financial picture. The other part of the tax program are cuts. We have 4.1 million federal employees. That's way, way too many. And thousands of them retire each year. Simply don't replace them. And you can switch people around to cover critical positions. We also have 645 federal agencies and sub-agencies. I would bring in the directors of each of those and tell them they need to cut their budget by 2 to 3%. Now, when we did that a few years ago with sequestering type procedures, they cut in the places that would hurt the public the most. And I think that was done intentionally. We would do it just the opposite. We would say, if you cut it in a way that hurts the public, your job is gone. You're the one who's being hurt. And that's the way that
Since the ink dried on the Iranian deal, which I thought was an awful deal, by the way, it appears to me and to many others that Iran has become more aggressive. Frankly, their footprint in Syria, the testing of missiles. There are a lot of things happening. 4 Americans held hostages as hostage in Iran. What would be your policy?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think a kindergartner could did a better deal than that. That was ridiculous. But I mean, it was ridiculous. First of all, I wouldn't even begin negotiations unless they released our hostages. And then we would have to have anytime, anywhere inspections. And if they don't agree to that, then that tells you that they don't plan on complying. If they planned on complying, then of course that would not be a problem. So that tells you right there what you should be doing. But you have to be able, to have accountability and verification and enforcement. But those are the key elements to a good deal of that type. None of those things have been done in an effective way there. So in a Carson administration, I would make it clear that that was really done as an executive deal. So it really doesn't hold any water with the new administration. So we're going to have a renegotiation. And the other thing you have to remember is when you strengthen your ties with your allies and your friends once again realize that you are their friends and that they can count on you, we will then be able to put some very significant sanctions on them to really bring them to the place where we need them to be. We will get a great deal more ability to mold the direction of the world when we have strong allies and when we have a strong military. And so people are going to be willing to listen to what we're talking about at that point. Right now, it's sort of like we're a little gnat, and they just sort of switch us away. That will not happen when we have serious people who are truly concerned about the future of America.
Dr. Carson, Christina from Greenville noted, and we saw with the last presidential debate, there's a diversity of perspectives on whether our current immigration system is broken or not, whether or not it should be reformed and how the chief executive and others should execute or enforce immigration laws. What are your perspectives on what reforms, if any, you would like to see and how you would faithfully execute the laws if you were president?
Well, I was down at the Arizona-Mexico border a few months ago, and I was horrified at what I saw there. I mean, it's just so porous. I mean, there was a fence, but I mean, it's the kind of fence that would have barely slowed me down as a kid. And in one place there was a big hole that was cut in it, and they had strung a couple of pieces of barbed wire across it. And the photographers who were there just went through right there so they could shoot from the other side. And they weren't even athletic people. I mean, so you can imagine how easy it is to get across. And then our government has a catch and release program, particularly for first-time offenders. You just send them back. And there's no seriousness going on. Over the last couple of years, ICE has told, the sheriffs down there to release people. There's been 67,000 released. And many of them have criminal records, and they can then continue to terrorize Americans. So we need to have a federal government that works with the border agents and with the people who live down there and not against them. Now, can we seal that border? Absolutely. In Yuma County, Arizona, they decreased the flow of illegals by 97%. By having a double fence with an asphalt road in between so you have quick access to the vehicles. They actually have border guards on it. You can imagine that, having border guards on the border. But, you can actually put them there within visual sight of each other, about a quarter of a mile. Put in motion detectors. You can use drones for early detection, not to shoot people, which they try to say that I'm saying. And you have to prosecute first-time offenders rather than have a catch and release program. And you extend that across all 9 sectors for the whole southern border. That will stop the people from coming in. You also have to turn off the spigot that dispenses the goodies. If there's no goodies, there won't be any reason to try and come here. That leaves 11.5 or so million people here, at least. What are you going to do with them? Well, if they have a pristine record, I would give them an opportunity to get registered. They'd have a 6-month period to get registered. They have to pay back taxes, and they have to pay taxes going forward. It doesn't give them the right to vote. It doesn't make them an American citizen. But they can become guest workers if they're willing to work in a segment where we need them. That's primarily going to be in the ag area and in the hospitality area. No pathway to citizenship. If they want to become a citizen, they have to go through the same procedure as anybody else would have to go through, which means they have to leave and go through that process. But that wouldn't be the end. We also have to recognize that we are compassionate and reasonable people. And right now in Cameroon, we have American companies that are developing the millions of acres of incredibly fertile land, getting record crops, making great profits, at the same time developing the infrastructure there, providing jobs for people there, and teaching them the ag business, making friends for America and not costing the American government 1 penny. We can do the very same kinds of things all around the globe. That should be our foreign policy. Our foreign policy should not be borrowing money from China and paying the interest on it and then giving it to another country. That doesn't make any sense. But we can do the same kinds of things in Central America and South America so that our companies are profiting, our government's not having to put out money, we're making friends, and we're creating an environment that will keep people from needing to come here in the first place. That's American foreign policy.
Dr. Carson, Catherine Graham of Chapin, South Carolina, has a question about your faith. You certainly have had a very public faith, and frankly, we do appreciate the fact that we live in a country whose foundation is the Judeo-Christian foundation. How would your faith influence your leadership if you were president of the United States?
Well, my faith would influence my leadership the same way that everybody's faith influences their actions and reactions to other people. Everybody has faith in something. Even atheists have faith in something, and it influences the way that they think. In my case, I believe in a loving God who is compassionate. And I believe in godly principles of loving your fellow man caring about your neighbor, developing your God-given talents to the utmost so that you become valuable to the people around you, having values and principles that govern your life. And so that will obviously impact the way I think about things. When you look through the Bible, there are a lot of references to compassion. But there's also the concept of fairness. So when I think about compassion, I think about compassion for everybody, from the bottom of our society to the top of our society. Doesn't matter what their race is, doesn't matter what their religion is, it doesn't matter what their sexual orientation is. None of those things matter. Our Constitution protects everybody, and it gives everybody equal rights, but it doesn't give anybody extra rights.
Dr. Carson, you and I were talking about the concept of justice in the back, and Christopher from Greenville correctly notes that there's a chance the next president will make a selection on the United States Supreme Court, and perhaps two. What qualifications are you looking for in him or her?
It's a very important question because I do believe the next president will probably get at least two picks. And if that's a progressive person and they get two picks, we probably should start looking for some place to move to. But I don't think that's going to happen, quite frankly. And what I would be looking for is the record that a person has, not what they answer in an interview, but what kind of life have they led, what kind of decisions have they made, which gives you a very good impression of what they think about the Constitution and how the Constitution is interpreted. The Constitution is an incredible document, and I believe it was blessed. In 1787, at the Constitutional Convention, things were about to fall apart. Everybody had different notions of how it should be done in small states or large states. And, before the whole thing disrupted, Benjamin Franklin, the elder statesman, 81 years old, got up in front of that assembly. And he said, "Gentlemen, during the Revolutionary War, every other phrase out of your mouth was, 'God save us.' And now you don't want to even talk about God." He said, "Let's get on our knees and let's pray to God and ask for wisdom." And the whole assembly knelt and they prayed and they got up and they put together a 16 and a third page document that has withstood the test of time. And we should keep it in a sacred.
Dr. Carson, very little today happens in a bipartisan fashion in Congress. I'm sure we've all noted that fact. But in the last 2 weeks, 370 members of the House, 91 senators have all agreed on keeping Guantanamo Bay and the enemy combatants in Cuba. The president, however, is threatening an executive order to perhaps locate 50 to 60 these enemy combatants to either South Carolina, Colorado, or Kansas. What would a Carson administration do?
Well, Carson administration would follow the rule of law and wouldn't be trying to change it by executive order. I'm very hopeful that Congress will stand up to this president. And, they do have the power of the purse. And I would just say to him, "Mr. President, if you do that, we're going to defund everything, including your breakfast."
Dr. Carson, Nathan from Camp Bell, South Carolina, which is in Spartanburg County, wants to know what you think about ISIS from this standpoint. The president had a containment strategy, I'm not sure what the strategy is right now, but there's another strategy that says they should be eliminated. What would President Carson do with ISIS?
Well, we have to recognize that they are part of the global jihad movement, and they wish to destroy us and everything that has anything to do with us. And in a situation like that, you have two choices. You can sit there and call them the JV and say they're only important over there and we don't really need to worry too much about them, while they continue to grow and increase their strength and eventually reach a point where they will have nuclear weapons. Or we can use logic and common sense and wisdom and say that we're going to use every resource available to us, economic, overt, covert, every weapon system, and we're going to eliminate them first. That's what
Crystal Glasgow of Greenville asked a very important question about cycles and the generational nature of poverty, particularly in inner cities. Under the Carson administration, how do we tackle the issue of poverty and create a path going forward for the middle class?
That's an extremely good question. And what we have to recognize is that a lot of the government policies have created these cycles of poverty. Some of the things that we do encouraging, out of wedlock births, just as an example. In the inner cities, in African American communities, 73% of babies are born out of wedlock. When that first baby is born, usually that woman's educational endeavors cease, and the children are sent into a cycle of poverty. They're 4 times as likely to end up in poverty. Now, how do we break a cycle like that? Certainly not by continuing to fund and that kind of activity. What I would recommend is daycare centers that are sponsored by the private sector, not by the government, in which we put people who have an opportunity to talk to these women who will now have a chance to go and get their GED or their associate's degree or their bachelor's degree because their children can be taken care of. And they learn how to take care of themselves, and then they teach that to their children. That's the only way you're ever going to break those cycles of poverty. But it has to be done by us and not by the government, because then it becomes a big, bloated behemoth that doesn't accomplish anything whatsoever. And also, the private sector, we will have the ability to talk to these young women who in many cases have never had anybody talk to them and tell them how valuable they are and instill the kind of self-worth into them that will allow them to function at a very high level in our society. That's just one example of the kind of program. There's programs throughout, but if we use that same type of philosophy, we will eventually be able to create in America once again the can-do attitude as opposed to the what can you do for me attitude.
Dr. Carson, Jeff from Spartanburg wants to know, as a physician, how would you replace the so-called Affordable Care Act?
Well, I'm glad you said so-called, because it's certainly not very affordable. It was envisioned to take care of the 15% of people who didn't have health care. We could have given them all Cadillac plans for a lot less money and not disrupted the whole system. Obviously, it was not really for that purpose. It was for another purpose. It was so that government could gain control over the most important thing a person has. And that's why I have railed so much against it. It's not because I don't want everybody to have good health care, but it's because this country is of, for, and by the people. and the government is supposed to be there to facilitate life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With Obamacare, the government comes along and says, I don't care what you people think. We're shoving this down your throat, and if you don't like it, too bad. Well, that fundamentally changes the relationship between the people and the government, and we cannot let that stand. Now, I never like to complain without having a solution. And I would provide health savings account for every single American. And it would start at birth. We would fund it with the very same dollars that we fund traditional health care with. They would just go to a different place. And you would give people the ability to shift money within their HSA, within their family. So dad was $500 short, he could get it from mom or sister or uncle or anybody in the family. Gives you an enormous flexibility to cover almost anything except major catastrophic things. And you still have your catastrophic health care for that, which is much cheaper because nothing is coming out of that. And you make it possible to buy that across state lines as well. That will take care of 75% of the people very effectively. For the indigent, the way we take care of them now is with Medicaid. Annual Medicaid budget, $400 to $500 billion. Actually, closer to $500 billion. How many people participate? 80 million. Probably a little less than that, but I'm being generous. 80 million into 400 billion was 5,000 times. What could you buy with $5,000 for each man, woman, and child on Medicaid? Concierge practice generally costs $2,000 to $3,000 a year. And then you have money left over to buy your catastrophic insurance, which is much cheaper. We're working on systems right now with a lot of medical economists to really make this very attractive and make it work very well so that nobody will even want Obamacare. Because even the indigent will now have a system in which they have control over their own accounts. And they are just as valuable as anybody else. Right now, half the physicians, more than half, don't even take them. And they feel like second-class citizens. That's not where we want our people. And there are some in Washington who say, well, but the poor people, they can't handle a health savings account. They're not smart enough to do that. Then why do they say that about people? That's not right. They said that about food stamps, but people learn how to use food stamps and make them last, and they will learn very quickly if you've got that diabetic foot ulcer, not to go to the emergency room where it costs 5 times more than it does in the clinic. You're going to go to the clinic where they're going to patch you up, and instead of just sending you out, they're going to say, let's get your diabetes under control so you're not back here in 3 weeks with another major problem, a whole nother level of savings. Plus you're teaching people the concept of personal responsibility and not dependency.
Dr. Carson, we're about at the end already. This has been very quick. Very quick hour. Your schedule is up for minutes to go on. I would love for this to go on as well. So we're down to about 3 questions left. One of my final questions is on entitlement reform. Francis wants to know, when you think about our senior citizens, Medicare, and Social Security, how do we reform these programs in such a way where there's life left in them for the next generation? And then Trey will have his last question.
Well, we have to recognize, for instance, with Social Security, it's going to run out in 2033 if we don't do something. So I would be looking at people who are under the age of 50 in terms of very gradual increase so that there's adequate time. And for people who are under 30, I would be looking at options that we can give them because, utilizing money over that long a period of time over which you have some say in terms of how it's invested could really yield something very substantial for you. But you have to start that far back. As far as Medicare is concerned, that's going to run out of money too if we don't change the trajectory. If you look at it, it has Part A, B, C, and D. Part C, Meta Choice, where there's a government subsidy, you can then choose to buy private insurance with that. We have to make sure that all the choices include catastrophic insurance. And what you could do is give people the ability to take the extra money. If they buy something that doesn't use the entire government subsidy, it goes into their health savings account. Right now, health savings accounts are severely limited for people on Medicare. That can be easily eliminated so that they can continue using their health savings account, which they had before they were Medicare eligible. That's the kind of thing that's going to make a huge difference. We're going to be rolling that out in great detail very shortly. I've had it looked at by multiple economists. It works. It works extremely well, and it will save Medicare. There are those who say, I want to get rid of Medicare. Don't want to get rid of Medicare. Maybe change the name of it and make it into something that actually is efficient and works.
Dr. Carson, I want to ask you one more question, but I want to make this one observation. I eat dinner almost every night with Senator Scott, and I recently had a birthday, so he gave me a gift for my birthday. If you are looking for a fiscal conservative as your running mate, it doesn't get any cheaper, more fiscally conservative. The box costs more than the gift, so if that's what you're looking for. We are under the watchful eye of President Lincoln, and I can't help but think how proud he would be to see his party have a candidate of color for the highest office in our land being interviewed by the only Republican African-American senator in the United States Senate. I would think that he would be smile at what's on the stage, but I think that he would be concerned at the audience and our inability to attract people of color to hear our message. How can we do better?
That's a very, very good question. It's going to require time, and it's a good thing that we have a relatively long election cycle because, there's been a great attempt to reinterpret what people say to certain segments of our society. To create these walls between people in order to preserve certain voting blocks. But I think the message that I'm talking about in terms of empowerment is going to continue to infiltrate the Black community, the Latino community, all of the communities over the course of time. And the progressive movement will try to do everything they can to stop that message from getting out. And, they're going to see if they can somehow knock me out and discourage me in the meantime. But it's not going to work because all of that just encourages me more. But, when I was speaking to excuse the name, but Al Sharpton's conference of people in New York. I talked to that audience who weren't that enthusiastic about seeing me in the beginning, but I talked to them about empowerment, the empowerment of education. I talked about the fact that in the African American community in America, there's over $1 trillion of assets. There's less than 10 countries that have a GDP of $1 trillion. And how you can turn the dollars over in your own community 2 or 3 times before you send it out. And that's how you create wealth. And you reach down and you pull other people along with you. And, I talked about the contributions that Black people have made to the development of America. Many people don't know about a whole litany of things. And I ended by talking about Elijah McCoy, who invented the automatic lubrication system for locomotive engines. In fact, he had so many inventions, people would say, is that a McCoy? Is that the real McCoy? And they were so enthralled by the time I got finished, standing ovation, they wanted to photograph Al Sharpton saying, who are these people? But the fact of the matter is, we've got to get the message out because, some have said, Carson, he grew up in poverty, he must have benefited from government programs, and now he wants to withdraw them all. That is total propaganda. I have no intention of withdrawing any safety nets that are needed, but I have placed an emphasis on creating ladders of opportunity that will allow people to come from a dependent state to become part of the fabric of success in America.
Carson, we are down to the last question, and we certainly have enjoyed the opportunity to ask you questions. I think you've enjoyed hearing his answers to the questions. Dr. Carson, we know that our nation faces many trials and tribulations and challenges and choices that we will have to make in 2016. Perhaps one of the more important choices in 2016 will be your decision to either support or not support a major university in South Carolina. Today in the NCAA playoff scheme, Clemson University is number one. So my question is, Dr. Carson, if Clemson ends up playing TCU or Baylor or Ohio State, Baylor is God bless. Let's pray for the Ohio State fans over here. Will you commit to supporting Clemson University for the national championship?
I will commit at this moment to supporting all universities in America.